3 weeks before my wedding, I was standing in my kitchen in sock feet, half a cup of coffee gone cold in my hand, scrolling Facebook before work when I saw the post. My mother had uploaded 12 photos from a bridal boutique. In every one of them, my sister Paige was smiling in a floor-length ivory gown. Not cream. Not champagne. Not light neutral. Ivory. The kind of ivory that photographs white. The kind of ivory with a fitted bodice, lace applique, and a long train folded behind her like she was the bride. And my mother had written the caption herself. My beautiful girl is going to steal the show. I stared at that sentence until the words stopped looking. Real. Champagne glasses sat on a counter in the background. Paige had one hand on her hip. My mother stood beside her with that proud smile she always saved for my sister. In photo 4, the price tag was still visible if you zoomed in. $6,500 for a dress my sister was planning to wear to my wedding. What my mother did not know, standing there in that boutique and playing out whatever little fantasy she had built in her head, was that my maid of honor had already been planning for 2 months. And by the time my mother arrived at my venue in that near-white masterpiece, security would already be waiting at the gate. But to explain how we got there, I have to go back further. Not to my engagement. To Paige's. Paige is 3 years older than I am. And as far back as I can remember, my mother loved us differently. That is the cleanest way I know how to say it. Paige was celebrated. I was managed. Paige was special. I was sensitive. Paige was the daughter my mother displayed. I was the daughter, she corrected. When Paige got engaged, my mother treated it like a coronation. There were 3 dress shopping trips before Paige even picked a gown. 3. The first one was just the 2 of them. Brunch downtown, then a private appointment in Nashville. My mother posted 17 photos afterward, like it was a magazine spread. The caption said, "Finding the perfect dress for my perfect girl." The second trip, I got invited. I drove 40 minutes to meet them, and by the time I arrived, Paige was already standing on a platform in a fitted mermaid gown, while my mother sat on a velvet chair like she was approving a royal portrait. I told Paige the neckline looked beautiful on her. My mother glanced at me over her glasses and said, "Don't give too many opinions, Wendy. You don't really understand your sister's style." So, I sat on an ivory couch for 2 hours. I held Paige's purse. I smiled for one photo. The third trip, I wasn't invited at all. I found out it had happened because my mother posted an album afterward. Professional lighting, a bouquet in Paige's hands. My mother dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief like she was starring in her own memory. I wish I could say I was shocked. I wasn't. I was used to being near the center of things without ever standing in. Back then, I had been dating Luke for about a year. At Thanksgiving, no one asked me about him. My mother asked Paige about her registry twice during dessert, then turned to me and said, "So, are you still doing the therapy thing with those kids?" I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I had been doing the therapy thing for 6 years. That was my place in the family. Close enough to be useful. Never important enough to be seen clearly. Luke proposed on our front porch on a warm evening in Tennessee, with steaks burning on the grill and my sweet tea sweating rings into the railing. There was no photographer, no hidden camera, no dramatic speech. He just set a small wooden ring box beside my glass, looked at me, and started to say my name. I said yes before he finished the sentence. He laughed. I cried. The steaks burned black. That was Luke. He is a structural engineer. He speaks in measurements and quiet certainty. He builds things the way other people make promises. Shelves, garden beds, repair plans, a future. That night, I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom," I said. Luke proposed. There was a pause so long I counted it. Then she said, "Well, I hope he knows what he's getting into." That was it. Not congratulations, not let me see the ring, not I'm happy for you. Just that. I stood in the kitchen with my phone on speaker, one hand pressed against the counter, and felt something old and familiar settle into my chest. Luke heard the whole thing. Later, when we were getting ready for bed, he sat beside me and put one hand on my shoulder. "Your mom doesn't get to say that," he said. And you do not need her permission to be happy. I believed him about the second part. I wasn't ready to believe him about the first. 2 weeks later, I texted my mother and asked if she wanted to come dress shopping with me. She replied 3 hours later, "Can't this weekend." Helping Paige with her kitchen remodel. I tried again the next week. That reply was longer. I could still recite it from memory if I had to. Just wear something simple. This marriage won't last and you'll regret spending money on a dress you only wear once. Luke seems nice, but you two are so different. I'm saying this because I love you. I screenshotted the text. Not because I had a plan. Not because I was gathering evidence. I screenshotted it because I needed proof that I wasn't imagining it. That the words had actually been said. That my own mother had looked at my engagement and seen something temporary. I went dress shopping without her. My maid of honor, Megan, came with me. So did 2 women from work. We drove to a bridal shop off Highway 70, the kind of place that didn't serve champagne and didn't pretend every fitting was a television episode. The consultant pulled 8 dresses. The 4th one was mine. Soft lace. A-line skirt. Cap sleeves. Nothing loud. Nothing theatrical. Just beautiful. I stepped onto the platform and looked at myself in the mirror and felt my whole body go still. Megan said, very quietly, "That's the one." I cried in the fitting room for 6 minutes. The consultant brought me water and tissues and had the good sense not to ask why. I paid for the dress myself. At the time, I thought my mother refusing to come was the worst part. I was wrong. She was only warming up. Within a month of my engagement, my mother launched what I now think of as her campaign. The strategy was simple. If she could not control my wedding directly, she would control the story around it. She called Aunt Helen first, then Aunt Karen, then Grandma Ruth. The message was always the same. Wendy is shutting me out. Wendy chose her friends over her own mother. Wendy didn't even invite me dress shopping. I know this because the family started contacting me in that careful, guilty tone people use when they've already been told who the villain is. Aunt Helen texted one Tuesday night, "Honey, your mom is crying every night. Can't you just include her? She's your mother." I stared at my phone for a long time. I had invited Beverly twice. Twice. She had refused both times, and one of those refusals included telling me my marriage would fail. But somehow in her version, I was the cold one, the selfish one, the daughter tearing the family apart. Aunt Karen called after that. "Your mom is devastated, Wendy. Just throw her a bone." I tried to explain. I told her I had invited my mother, that she had declined. Karen cut me off before I finished. "Well, that's not what she told us." Of course it wasn't. That was the week I realized silence was not peace. Silence was surrender. If I said nothing, my mother's version would become the family version. By Thanksgiving, by Christmas, by every future gathering, I would be the daughter who wouldn't let her own mother be part of her wedding. And once a family story hardens, it becomes harder to fight than the truth itself. Then Megan forwarded me something that made it worse. My mother had told Grandma Ruth I was marrying Luke for his money. Luke drove a dented Tacoma with duct tape on one mirror. He was doing well, yes, but not in some secret millionaire way. The accusation was ridiculous, which meant it was not meant to be believed literally. It was meant to stain me, to make people question my motives, to make my grandmother look at my engagement and wonder if I was opportunistic, shallow, dishonest. That night Luke made pasta, and neither of us touched it. We sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light above the sink while the food went cold between us. "You've got 2 options," he said. "Let her wreck the wedding, or protect it. I'm with you either way." I looked at him and asked the question I had apparently needed someone else to answer for me. Would I be wrong to do something? He didn't even hesitate. "She told your grandmother you're marrying me for money," he said. I drive a truck held together by optimism. I think we're past the point of pretending this is normal. That got a laugh out of me. A small one, but real. At 9:15 that night, I called Megan. She answered before the second ring. Megan runs events for a hotel group in Nashville. Logistics are her native language. She loves a clipboard the way some people love poetry. "I need help," I said. "But first, Tell me if I'm overreacting. You are not overreacting, she said immediately. You've given that woman 29 years. You're asking for one day. I closed my eyes. The relief of hearing someone say it plainly almost made me cry. I'm not taking her off the guest list, I said. I don't want to be the daughter who banned her own mother from her wedding, but I need to be ready for whatever she does. Good, Megan said. I could hear papers moving on her end. A drawer opening, her brain shifting into motion. Don't ban her, just prepare. For what? Trust me, she said. Give me 2 months. I should probably have asked more questions. Instead, I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides dread. 6 weeks before the wedding, I drove to my mother's house without calling first. I needed to look her in the eye and say the thing both of us had been circling. She was sitting at the kitchen table with Paige, drinking tea with a catalog open between them like it was any ordinary day. Mom, I said, I need to talk to you about the wedding. She didn't look up. What now? I want you there, I said, but I need you to support me, not compete with me. That made her lift her head. Compete? She said. I'm your mother. Everything I do is for this family. Then why did you tell Aunt Helen I didn't invite you dress shopping? I invited you twice. She turned slowly toward Paige, as if performing for an audience. Do you see this? She asked. This is what I deal with. Paige stared down at the table. I waited. I gave my mother the chance to say she had been hurt, the chance to say she had handled it badly, the chance to say anything remotely honest. Instead, her eyes filled with tears and her voice dropped into that wounded whisper she always used when she wanted to turn herself into the victim. You're turning everyone against me, she said. Your father would be ashamed. My father had been dead for 6 years. Heart attack. Hardware store. Saturday morning. And there she was, using him like a weapon. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the tile. I asked you a question, I said. And you answered it. Then I left. It was the first time in my life I had walked out on my mother in the middle of a conversation. Even while driving away, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I knew it would not be the last. 10 days later, Megan called at 7:40 inches the morning. Check your mom's Facebook. I was still in bed. Luke was in the shower. I opened the app with one eye half shut, and then every bit of sleep left my body. There it was. 12 photos. A high-end bridal boutique on West End. Paige on a platform in front of a 3-panel mirror. The dress. That dress. Ivory. Lace. Sweetheart neckline. Beading at the hem. Cathedral-length train folded behind her like a statement. This was not a guest dress. It was not an evening gown. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a bridal gown. And the caption was worse than the pictures. My beautiful girl is going to steal the show. So proud of this one. I scrolled through the comments. Gorgeous. Better than the bride. My mother had liked every single one. By the time Luke came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, breathing like I had run somewhere. He looked at the screen for 5 seconds. Then he nodded once. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, I called Megan. She answered instantly. I said one sentence. Start the plan. That afternoon, I called Paige. I did not want to, but I needed to know I had done everything I could before I crossed whatever line came next. She picked up on the 4th ring. Hey, Wendy. I saw the dress Mom bought you. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. Paige, I said. You know that's a bridal gown, right? It's not white, she said finally. It's ivory. It has a train. Another silence. I could hear her breathing change. I lowered my voice. I'm asking you, sister to sister. Please do not wear that dress to my wedding. When she answered, her voice was small. Mom already told everyone about it. If I change now, she'll be devastated. I stared at the wall in front of me. And if you wear it, I said, I'll be devastated. Who matters here, Paige? That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. The line went quiet again. It was the kind of quiet that tells you someone is not thinking. They are choosing, or more accurately, falling back into a choice they were trained to make years ago. I gave her 10 more seconds. Then I said, I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you not to wear a wedding dress to my wedding. She said nothing. I hung up. She did not call back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. That was my answer. When I texted Megan that Paige was still going to wear it, her reply came back in 4 seconds. I know. We're ready. A few days later, we met at a coffee shop near the venue. Megan walked in carrying a 3-ring binder with a tabbed cover. Across the front, in neat block letters, it said, Operation Ivory Shield. I laughed so hard I had to cover my mouth. You named it? Everything important needs a name, she said, sitting down. Then she opened the binder. Inside was a printed floor plan of Crestwood Vineyards, a guest arrival timeline, contact numbers, and a laminated photo of my mother pulled from Facebook. Megan pointed to the entrance gate. The venue has a dress code enforcement policy, she said. Not unusual for high-end weddings. If the hosts request enforcement, staff handles it quietly at arrival. No screaming. No public fight. No negotiation. She flipped another page. I talked to the coordinator. Her name is Diana Ross. Not the singer. 54. Runs events like a general with better jewelry. Megan had already briefed her on everything. The plan was simple. A navy backup dress in Paige's size would be kept at the front desk in a garment bag. If my mother or Paige arrived in ivory, white, or anything clearly bridal, they would be intercepted before reaching the main lawn. Staff would explain that the dress code was being enforced at the couple's request. If they agreed to change, they could come in. If they refused, they would be escorted back to the parking area. No arguing, no exception for titles like Mother of the Bride. No loopholes, just policy. I looked at the binder, then back at Megan. Am I going too far? She shut the binder and leaned forward. Going too far is spending $6,500 on a bridal gown, so one daughter can humiliate the other at her own wedding. That was the exact moment I stopped, apologizing in my head. 3 weeks before the wedding, Grandma Ruth called me on a weekday. That alone told me something was different. She is the kind of woman who asks if you are eating enough, and remembers everybody's birthday without writing anything down. She usually called on Sundays. A weekday call meant wait. Wendy, honey, she said. I saw the pictures. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't know why. It just felt like the right altitude for the truth. Then she said 7 words no one in my family had ever said to me. I want you to know I see it. My throat closed instantly. Not because I was shocked, because I had been waiting my whole life. She went on in that thin, careful voice older women get when they have spent decades measuring what they are allowed to say. Your mother is my daughter, and I love her, she said. But love does not make me blind. Then she told me something I had never heard before. Her own mother had done the same thing. Picked one daughter, dimmed the other, rewarded one, corrected the other. And Grandma Ruth had stayed quiet because that was what women in the family did back then. You endured. You explained it away. You did not make waves. Don't make my mistake, she said. Don't keep quiet. I cried on the kitchen tile while the afternoon light stretched across the floor, and for the first time in my life, I felt less alone in my own bloodline. Before we hung up, I asked if she would sit in the front row at the wedding. Not on my mother's side, but near the aisle where I could see her before I walked down. I'd like that very much, she said. The night before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the venue. 30 people. Long tables. Patio lights. Wine glasses catching gold in the dark. My mother arrived 20 minutes late in an all-white pantsuit with pearl earrings and heels that clicked hard enough to announce her from the doorway. A preview. A warning. Shot. The dinner went fine for almost an hour. Then someone handed my mother a microphone for the toasts. She stood up, smoothed the front of her jacket, and smiled at the room. I just want to say, she began, I pray this works out for Wendy. God knows she deserves a win after everything she's been through. The whole table went still. I felt Luke's hand close around mine under the table. My mother turned toward Paige next. And, Paige, honey, you look stunning tonight, as always. Megan, sitting across from me, lowered her phone just enough to record. Not to threaten anyone. Just so my mother could not rewrite the evening later. After dinner, I was walking to my car when she followed me into the parking lot. It was warm and dark and the gravel shifted under our shoes. I know you told Paige to change dresses, she said. I asked her not to. Wear a wedding gown to my wedding. She stepped closer. If you embarrass me tomorrow, I will make sure everyone in this family knows exactly who you really are. There was one working lamppost in the lot. Its light caught her earrings. Her jaw was set the way it always was when she had already decided the ending of a conversation. And who am I, Mom? I asked. She answered with one word. Ungrateful. That was her favorite knife, because it implied debt, that my life itself was something she had given me and I had failed to repay. I held her gaze, for a second longer than she expected. Then I guess you've already decided what kind of mother you want to be tomorrow, I said. I got in my car, drove 4 blocks, and called Megan. She's wearing it, I said. Activate everything. Already done, Megan replied. Diana's briefing the team. 14 hours before my ceremony, I knew exactly what was coming. And for the first time, I was not afraid of it. The bridal suite at Crestwood smelled like hairspray, coffee, and eucalyptus the morning of the wedding. The vineyard was silver in the early light, rows of vines beyond the window, white chairs set in a crescent around the ceremony arch below. Megan moved around the room with the calm of a surgeon. 2 staff members at the gate from 3 onward, she said while curling my hair. Photos of Beverly and Paige distributed. Backup dress ready. Diana has security looped in. And if Mom refuses? They walk her to the parking area politely, Megan said. Deanna's exact words were, "We do this with grace. This is a vineyard, not a nightclub." I almost smiled. At 9:15, I stepped into my dress. The same A-line gown I had chosen myself, the one I had paid for myself, the one no one had helped me buy. Megan zipped the back and stepped aside. I looked in the mirror and felt something settle. Not nerves, not excitement exactly. Ownership. This dress. This man. This day. Mine. Around noon, Megan's phone buzzed. She looked down, then showed me the screen. My mother's Instagram story. A selfie in her living room with Paige. Both of them in ivory. The caption read, "The Sheridan girls are ready." I looked at it for 3 seconds. Then I handed the phone back. Okay, I said. Megan nodded once. Okay, by 3:47 p.m. I was in the bridal suite where I was supposed to be. I was not at the entrance. I was not pacing the lawn. I was not waiting to confront anyone. That was the whole point. I had spent enough of my life reacting to my mother. I was done arranging myself around her choices. Megan positioned herself near the front with a clear view of the entrance and texted me updates in real time. The first message came through at 3:49. Silver Mercedes just pulled in. Then, she wore the big one. I stared at the screen. I could picture it perfectly anyway. My mother stepping out of that car in $6,500 of ivory lace, smiling at the whispers, feeding on the double takes, finally getting the dramatic entrance she had been building toward for weeks. Paige, just behind her, also in ivory, less elaborate, still bridal enough to make the point. Another text came in. Guests noticed. Staff, moving now. I stood by the vanity with both hands flat against the wood. In my mind, I could see the path from the gravel lot to the gate, the trellis, the side seating area, the point where attention becomes embarrassment. Later, Megan filled in the details for me. My mother made it about 15 steps past the gate before 2 venue staff members approached. Black vests, earpieces, calm posture. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sheridan," one of them said. "We have a dress code in effect for today's celebration, and unfortunately, your current attire does not meet the guidelines set by the couple." My mother froze. Excuse me? I'm the mother of the bride. Yes, ma'am, he said. And the bride has requested enforcement for all guests. Then came the options: a prepared dress in her size, a changing area nearby, or the parking lot. My mother demanded to know where I was. They told her I was preparing for the ceremony. She refused to change. Of course she did. Megan said Diana appeared right after that, clipboard in hand, voice even, expression unreadable. The couple's wishes are clear, she told my mother. We can help you change into the dress we prepared, or we can escort you back to the parking area. Those are the two options. By then, some guests were watching from a distance, close enough to understand, far enough to stay polite. My mother looked for rescue and found none. Not from Aunt Helen, not from my cousin Diane, not from Luke's parents. No one came running to defend a woman trying to walk into her daughter's wedding dressed like a bride. My next text from Megan was 3 words. She chose parking. Then, 30 seconds later, Paige still there. That was the pause I think about most. Not my mother's humiliation. Paige's pause. The longest 5 seconds of her life. She watched our mother walk away. She looked at the venue, at the white chairs, at the arch, at the guests, at the life in front of her. Then one of the staff members held out the garment bag. Navy. Pressed. Ready. And for the first time in 33 years, Paige did not follow Beverly. She took the bag and asked where the changing room was. When Megan came back into the bridal suite, she closed the door and said 5 words. She's gone. Paige changed. Done. I let out a breath I think I had been holding for years. Something heavy lifted off me all at once. Not because my mother had lost, because I had finally stopped leaving the door open for her to ruin my joy and call it love. At 4, 3, the music began. The doors opened. Warm Tennessee light poured across the vineyard. Grandma Ruth was in the front row in a sage green dress we had picked together over FaceTime. When she saw me, she put both hands over her mouth and started crying before I even took my first step. I walked down the aisle alone. No one gave me away. I was not anyone's to give. Luke stood at the end in a slightly crooked tie, tapping one thumb against his other hand, the way he does when he is trying not to cry. Paige sat in the 3rd row in navy, eyes red, face steady. The chair beside Grandma Ruth, the one that should have held my mother, was empty. I did not look at it for long. I kept my eyes on Luke. His vows were short, so were mine. His ended with, "I choose you." Not the easy version, the real one, every day. Mine ended with, "I spent my whole life waiting for someone to show up for me. You did, and I'm done waiting for anyone else." When we kissed, the guests stood. As we walked back down the aisle together, I glanced through the far window and saw a silver Mercedes still parked in the gravel lot. I turned forward and kept walking. The reception felt like stepping into a life my mother had not managed to touch. White tent, string lights, wildflowers in jars, bluegrass drifting through warm evening air. I laughed. Not politely, not carefully, really laughed. Luke spun me during our first dance, slightly offbeat, and it was perfect. Megan gave her maid of honor speech and talked about our dorm room in college, my work, my stubbornness, my heart, and the fact that I had built a life that was truly mine. She did not mention Beverly once. That might have been the kindest choice anyone made all day. At the dessert table, I noticed Paige checking her phone over and over. Buzz. Glance. Set it down. Buzz. Again. By the 4th time, she powered it off and slid it into her clutch. Across the tent, Aunt Helen answered a call, listened for 3 seconds and said, "Beverly, I'm at the wedding. Wendy looks happy. I'll call you tomorrow." Then she hung up and went back to the dance floor. I found out later my mother stayed in that parking lot until 7:23 p.m. I never noticed when she left. I was busy, dancing with my husband. The phone campaign started the next morning. Of course it did. My mother called people crying. She said I had hired security to throw her out of her own daughter's wedding. She said she had never been so humiliated. She said she did not recognize the person I had become. It was a strong script. It had worked for her before. The difference this time was witnesses. Too many of them. Helen called her back and said, "I saw the dress, Beverly. It was a wedding gown." Karen told her, "I watched staff offer you a change. You refused." My cousin Diane texted the family group chat, one my mother was not in, and wrote, "Has anyone else's mother ever worn a bridal gown to her daughter's wedding, or is that just us?" The narrative did not explode. It eroded, slowly, publicly, irreversibly. For the first time in my memory, my mother's version of events could not overwrite reality because too many people had seen her walking toward a parking lot in ivory lace, with her head held high and no one behind her. Within 3 weeks, 3 family members declined her Thanksgiving invitation. Grandma Ruth said nothing at all, which from her was louder than most people shouting. Then Karen called me and apologized. She said my mother had done something similar to her years earlier when she got married, but nobody had believed her then. I sat with that for a long time. Family patterns survive on silence. That was the lesson underneath all of it, not just the favoritism, the silence around it. 2 weeks after the wedding, Grandma Ruth called my mother and said what she should have said 20 years earlier. Later, sitting with me in her living room under a crocheted blanket, she repeated the whole conversation from memory. She told Beverly she loved her. Then she told her the truth, that she had treated me the way previous women in the family had treated each other, that she had turned one daughter into the sun and the other into a shadow, that she had made love feel conditional and competition feel normal. My mother cried, then got angry, then blamed me, then blamed the wedding, then blamed everyone else. Grandma Ruth waited until she finished. Then she said, "I love you, Beverly, but right now I like Wendy more. And that should tell you something." When Grandma told me that, I cried so hard I had to laugh at myself, not because I was sad, because relief and grief are cousins, and sometimes they show up wearing each other's clothes. A month after the wedding, Paige texted me, "Can we get coffee?" Just us. I almost said no. Luke told me I did not owe her anything. Megan offered to sit in the parking lot if I went. I told her that was unnecessary. She came anyway. Paige was already at the cafe when I arrived. We sat across from each other in the strange quiet of 2 women who had been raised in the same house and taught completely different rules. Finally, she said, "I should have said no to the dress." "Yes," I said. She nodded. "I didn't know how." "I know." Then she told me our mother had called her 14 times after, leaving the venue, and said I had ruined her life. I asked Paige what she thought. She stared into her coffee for a long time before saying, "I think she ruined her own day." "And she almost ruined yours." I let that sit there. She needed to hear herself say it. Then she admitted our mother had asked her to post online about how badly I had treated her. And I said no. It was the first time, Paige told me, that she had ever said no to our mother about anything. I did not hug her. We were not there yet. But I did say, "That's a start." 3 months after the wedding, my mother sent me a 12-paragraph text. It used the phrase, "sorry if you felt hurt" twice. It used the word "but" 9 times. It never once said I was wrong. I did not answer by text. I wrote her The first draft was angry. The second was cold. The third was too long. The fourth was true. I told her I loved her. I told her I would always be her daughter. Then I told her I would never again let anyone, including her, make me feel like I did not deserve my own happiness. I told her that if she wanted a place in my life, it had to begin with honesty. Not about the dress, about everything. The favoritism, the things she said about my marriage, the years of making me feel like I was less than my sister. I mailed it on a Thursday. 2 weeks later, she called and asked if we could have lunch. I said yes, but I picked the restaurant. When she arrived, she was wearing a navy blouse and gray slacks. Not white, not ivory, navy. Neither of us mentioned that, but I noticed. I'm telling you this now, 7 months later, from the house Luke and I bought together. There is a wedding photo on the shelf behind me. In it, I am laughing. Luke's tie is still crooked. Grandma Ruth is in the front row dabbing her eyes. And there is an empty chair. I do not crop it out. It belongs there. It tells the truth. I did not tell this story so people would hate my mother. Beverly is complicated, damaged, still my mother. I told it because for a long time, I confused love with endurance. I thought keeping the peace meant swallowing every slight, every comparison, every dismissal, forever. I thought if I just stayed patient enough, good enough, quiet enough, she would finally see me clearly. She didn't, and letting go of that hope hurt more than the wedding itself. Here is what I know now. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors. You decide who gets to walk through and under what conditions. My mother and I are still figuring that out. It is not perfect. It is not a movie ending. But for the first time in my life, she knows I will not bend just because she cries. And for the first time in my life, I know I am allowed to protect my joy without asking permission. As for the ivory dress, Paige tried to return it after the wedding. The store would not take it back. It is still hanging in my mother's closet. Honestly, I can't think of a better ending than that.